Hello everyone, this is a presentation. I'm Benjamin Salem. This is another of my presentation on industrial design. This presentation is on design practice, and we're going to talk about many things. How do you practice design? How do you actually do the design? It's mostly applicable to industrial designers. And as always, I have to put a disclaimer here. There are many ways of practicing design, many ways of practicing industrial design. And this is one of the many ways, but this is the one that I'm familiar with, the one that I've been practicing for years, rather successfully, since I've been using it with clients that paid for some of my projects when I had a consultancy. So it does work. So we're going to talk about mind maps, we're going to talk about mood boards, what material we can use, how do we do drawings, how do we do modeling, and what is the whole purpose, what's the process of industrial design. So the first thing is mind maps. So mind maps are often ignored, and it's a real shame because they help set the framework of your project. And they also have something else very useful in that they help communicate with all the rest of the cohort, your team in particular, and because design is never done as individuals, 99% of the projects I've been doing in my whole life have been in a team. It helps you communicate and set the tone. So we have a lot of ideas, we need a lot of ideas, and how do we do that? Well, it's very easy to come up with hundreds of ideas and not knowing what to do with that. So what you do mind map. You come up with a lot of ideas and you put them on the map. You visualize them, you communicate them, and they become a starting point for your design process. So they're in a way, they help you see how your ideas evolve from the first moment you work on the project till you finalize the prototype you're going to show to your client. They help you manipulate those ideas. They help you, of course, visualize them, but manipulate them, see what are the connections, communicate those ideas with others. And they also help you prioritize what's the most important idea in what you're doing. So you put basically all the ideas in a piece of paper, or you post or something. Then what's the key ideas that you want to work on in your project? You want something to be friendly, costly, effective, efficient, stylish, etc., etc. And then what matters is that whatever way you do your mind map, they're going to help you. They need to, and they must help you formalize, visualize, and communicate your ideas and thought. If it doesn't work, you've got the wrong mind map, you've got the wrong methodology, the wrong approach, the wrong tool. You need to find the mind map that's going to work for you and your team. That's very important. So as you can see, you can use post-its, you can use big posters where you draw things on, and you use them as a quick and easy way to get your ideas through, to get your thought through, and to make a record of all the ideas that came through. That from the beginning of your project, all the ideas that you had, you keep a record of them so you don't forget them, and you can come back to them if you need that. And they also help you connect different ideas that seems completely unconnected, end up being very connected, and end up being very much something that can work together. So you could figure out that actually efficiency and usability are very related, because you're designing a keyboard, it needs to be efficient and it needs to be usable by your user. So both are very much connected. What's very good is that you have to stay open. There are no stupid ideas and no stupid contribution, and make sure everyone has an equal chance of putting their ideas on the mind map. It sounds a bit like, yeah, but what's the point? Can we just not go directly into design? Trust me, when you have a very complex project, when you have to be very creative, that is a very, very effective tool to help you come up with ideas out of the box, come up with connections between things that you haven't thought of before. So then you move to the next step, which is the mood board. So the mood board is even more trickier, and is just that people don't understand what a mood board is. But it's not about showing your mood, it's about showing the mood of the project. So it's about which style, which directions, which kind of product, which kind of graphics, which kind of visual, which kind of feel, which kind of philosophy or style you want to go for. And they're really about design themes and design directions. And they're very good for the client because you can show them your mood board and you can say, well, this is the kind of direction I want to have. And that's very good because the client knows the kind of style you're going to go for. And remember that the client is the one paying. So if they don't like your style, if your style is not at all what they had in mind, you might be into troubles. So best to clear all this at the beginning. And they have to be inspiring, and they have also to give a kind of narrative to your project. So if I'm designing a keyboard, I want something that is sleek, that's a bit like a piece of furniture that will fit very well on the table. So I need to show these. So generally you look at the context, you look also at the styling. You want something to look not like an Apple product because you're fed up of Apple. You want something that not look like a typewriter. So you want something very different. So you have a look, for example, I don't know, Concorde and maybe a Jaguar E-Type or Aston Martin. This is the kind of style you want for your keyboard. So that's the inspiration if you want. And also when you present that to your client or to the rest of your team, everyone knows where you're going. Everyone knows where the project is going. Everyone knows the kind of styling is going to come out of it. That's very important. The mood board, they also help create overall theme for the concept. So you take from the mood board one or two key sketch or key picture that you like, and then you add into it, you start sketching from that some drawings, and that end up being, in this case, as illustrated there, become directly your product. So visual elements from the mood board are used in the sketch, and through iterative process they are refined, the sketch are refined, you go back to your mood board, you refine your sketch, and then you end up with a very clear idea of what your project is going to be. And that's where you can realize that the mood boards are quite important. Now design. Now you've done the mood board, you've done the mind map. Now you just need to go to start doing something. Well, there are many ways of designing. There's many ways of sketching. Some of you might say, well, I just want to use a tablet with a touch screen. I want to use touchpad. I want to use a scanner, whatever. But honestly, the best way to do it is to start with the basics. A piece of paper and a pencil, a logbook and a pencil. That's all what you need. It doesn't even need to be a sketchbook, but you can have a sketchbook if you want. And it's the most important. You start with the pens. So it's very, because the pencil is a very direct, very simple, very low-tech extension of your hand, and you don't have to worry about batteries or setting or anything. You just draw on the piece of paper, and it's expandable. And you use pencils, so you have H to B, and the H is hard and B is soft. And what you do, you use those to create different line, different thickness. You can use a biro, you can use a fountain pen, you can use a marker, you can use all sorts of tools as long as you are comfortable with that. Then you have colored pencils and you have pastel, and you can use that to create nicer sketches. Now, of course, for some of you it's going to sound like kindergarten, but remember, it's about visualizing, it's about formalizing your design ideas. And the better you can visualize them, the better you can formalize them, the better you can communicate them to others and communicate them with your client. That's why it's important to pay attention to how you're going to visualize your design ideas, and hence this explaining how to draw. Of course, you can use your eraser, of course you can use markers, and again, I think what's very important is for you to try different tools. What you can do then is also use a mouse with a graphical user interface and a graphic package like Adobe Suite, or if you can't afford the Suite, you can get GIMP, which is a free software, and then you can start doing editing of your drawings. You can try to make them more professional, more sleek, and more presentable to a client. And then you can also make a quick and dirty model, which is generally a cardboard model, foam board model, just to quickly show the idea in physical form. If you're designing, let's say, a new mouse, you can quickly do it with foam or with cardboard, and then you have in front of you your very first model that you can use to discuss your design idea, explore different aspects of your design and refine it via further iterations. So the next thing you need to understand is that the world is not flat, so it's important that when you do your drawings, when you do your sketch, they are in perspective, especially for product or devices or systems that have a significant form, like a gear, like a gearbox, like a joystick, like a car. The form is very important. It's not just a 2D product extrapolated or autojet cut. So perspective add depth into your drawings, and it adds 3Dness to your drawings, and you can have single, double or triple point perspective. And what you need to think about in the case of industrial design is mostly single or double vanishing points to give you a perspective and depth to your projects. What you then do is you create generally a box, which is an enclosure where you can then include your product. So you start with the box in the perspective, and then within that box you position your product so that your product is more or less in perspective. They help you position your product, they help you position your product in context, because remember, things are not floating in space, they're always in context of other things, and that's what really matters. And when you do your perspective, is that you draw it in context in relation to other product and other objects. Particularly if it's a new product, then you have to make sure it's next to something people are familiar with. So if you're designing a new concept of a chair, make sure it's next to an existing chair or it's next to a table, so that you have an idea. If you're designing a new mouse, make sure it's next to a keyboard so that people know the size of what you're trying to design. And start with the light lines and then go into more and more heavy lines, like seen in the side of the drawing. The slide, sorry. Perspective drawings can again go into 3D, but that's not really what we do in industrial design or engineering. But if you have, maybe you're designing a big bridge or something that is an intergalactic battle cruiser, then you need three vanishing point perspective, because then there's also height that becomes a big problem. And it's also give you the impression of a wide angle camera. It's good to emphasize scale, and it also provides very dramatic visual effects. Next, what we use a lot in engineering is called axonometric perspective, which is not with vanishing points, and it's one where there are no distortion between the lines, so it's any axis, the drawing, the object is shown to exact scale. This is what we have in the fabrication drawings that we submit to a mechanical workshop or to any fabrication workshop. It gives them an exact measurement in every axis of the object that you want them to fabricate. Then what you do in your sketch, again, remember, we are in the business of convincing our client that what we're doing is the best for them. So if you can add shadows and shadings, that will add realism to your sketch, and that will make your sketch even more convincing, even more realistic. It's particularly useful when you have a complex shape and it's difficult to understand what it is. So with shadows, you help explain the subpart, you help explain what the actual shape of your design is. That's very important. As you can see in this side, this looks a bit complex, and then when you see the shadow, you have a bit, and also the shades on the different degrees of shade on the object itself. It helps you understand the shape of your design. You also have something else very interesting, is that shades and shadows project onto nearby objects, so that gives you an interesting idea of how they are positioned relatively to each other, their relative size, and their relative arrangement in the scene. And shades are also interesting when you do organic shape. A lot of it is just to do with the shape, with the shadows, like you see in the shoulder here. And like you can see in the apple as well. And you have different shadow cast on different sides. So you have different faces of an object, will have different level of shade, even darkness, to give you a clear indication of the orientation and also of where the light source is. That's important, because you can see that these objects are more or less in the same direction, with the same light source. And looking at the size of the shadow, we know that they're approximately the same size, roughly speaking. Then we have something else that we add to our sketches, which is line quality and tension. What they do, they give you boundaries, they give you contour, and they help understand better the 3Dness of the shape. Especially they help you combine with shades, they help you visualize subtle changes in the surface and in the curvature of your object. And that's very important. If you're designing a mouse or a car, you need to communicate that clearly to your potential client. So that's why you do that. Again, another thing that happens is that you have to look at the tension lines in your object. They're basically theoretical lines that show where the tension is, and they immediately give dynamics and immediately a sense of direction to your and movement to your object. Like you can see in the shark here, these two tension lines. You can see in the mouse these that are stronger in this way than that, just to visualize the direction the object has and visualize movement. You can also use different line qualities for different parts of an object to create different materials, to create different sizes and different types, mostly different materials. As you can see on these different shells, we can see the fabric lines are very different from the steel lines, which are much thicker because it's a rigid object compared to the fabric. Then the next thing you need to think about is to render your material. So how do you render material? As you can see around me, everything I'm holding, everything I have has material. So that helps make your sketch very realistic by adding textures and color effects. And that really makes the material, because each material has its own reflection and each material has its own colors. Using them correctly will help your sketch become much more convincing. So you have to look at the proper material that you want to use, understand how it works, understand how it reflects lights, and then see how you're going to sketch it and use color to emphasize things. Like for example, here you have these blue arrows to emphasize where things go, and you have this brown arrow again to show a big object go. So that shows that there's bigger content that goes in and smaller content that goes in. And that's the kind of thing you have to think about. And these are examples of different wood textures. Again, for wood, for example, you start with a brownish color for the background, and then you add details in a darker tone to show the textures of the wood. For aluminium, brushed aluminium, so something that's not shiny, you have you create a certain line, certain direction, and then you create shadow to create a light spot, to create highlights due to light, which is what happens with aluminium. There is highlighted reflections of the light. For chrome, it's a bit more complicated, so you have to create this. It's about the reflection rather than the material itself, because it's almost like a mirror. And what you do, you create these curved and broken lines with sharp edges and highlights in the middle, and that create this reflection. For fabric, you create a light background and then you create a crisscross, which is basically the woven element of your fabric, and that creates this very interesting fabric, very realistic yet very simple to make, and that's good enough to give you you immediately understand that this tool is covered with fabric, where this one is covered with chrome and the previous one was covered with wood. Okay, glass is different. Glass is a bit like chrome. It's all about the reflections. So what you need to do is apply subtle blue or green and then add darker shadows by thinking about how the light is going to work. So it's a bit tricky to do, and you need to think about it carefully. But essentially, you have a foundation which is blue or green, and then you added some darker shades to create different effect of reflections, because that's what glass is about. It's about reflecting. Then we move to something else. So now you've started doing your sketches, you can show your sketch to your client, and then you start having a proper idea about what your product is or what your design is, and you need to move to the general arrangement drawing. So it's about showing details showing explanation about it. All the elements drawn are at scale, and you have it's very interesting because you have assembly drawing, and here you have general arrangement drawings, and you have fabrication drawings, but they're all subset of the general arrangement drawing. What's very important in your general arrangement drawing is that you show the object, if you can, in different top size, side perspective view, and also show the assembly of what the different parts are. Everything has to be to scale. So this is an assembly, and here you have a general arrangement, and here you have a general arrangement again, but this is an assembled part. So you do the assembly of the parts, and then you do general arrangement of your product, or you do the general arrangement of each of your parts, depending on how you work on this. In our case, this is an example of mine. Here it's a general arrangement of one part that's been made in a mechanical workshop, specifically with a jet cut, and you give not only all the dimensions, all the measurements, but you explain also which material, and you also give some specific instructions. They should all be included in your fabrication drawing. Then we move to modeling, and then that's where you start going into something more complicated. You've done these so far, everything can be done by hand, and then you move to modeling, where you use a different type of modeling. So the first one we look at is solid modeling. So solid modeling is complete, valid, and ambiguous, and it's solid. So all the objects are inside or outside. All the points of an object are either outside of the object, so it's the shell, if you want, or inside the object. It's all properly connected. There are no gaps, no like we don't know what's happening here. It's unambiguous. You can rotate your object and you will see this complete and comprehensive, and there's nothing missing. And it's modeled as being a solid, not modeled as being anything else. So it has shape, size, it has material, it has you can even estimate its weight, and it's what you call solid modeling. Is everything is modeled as a solid. A good example of that is Creo, and here's a quick video of that. So and I leave you to watch the video. I put the link on the YouTube, and you can watch the video, and here's the link. And this is an example of a SolidWorks model that I've made. All of it is absolutely completely finished shape with clear edges and clear volume, so it's not barely done. This is a good example. Another example is Fusion 360. There's again a video that you can watch, and here's an example of a model that's been made, and you can see it's all properly made as if it were real, as if it's going to be made. Actually, that's what it's all about. Another one is SolidWorks, which is again, this one is made by Dassault, which also make Katia, and this is a bit more complicated in that it can model much more complex mechanism and parts. And these are solid modelers. Then you have something else, which is a surface modeler, and the surface modeler is different. A surface modeler is either for aesthetics, so for example designing a car, or technical, for example designing turbine blades in a turbine. And both, you can either construct curves with splines, so you give a different spline, then you swipe them across a certain railing, or you mesh them, or you can manipulate, like we can see in this picture, animated picture at the bottom, where you take a flat surface, you create a flat surface, you create vertices, and then from this you can take each of the vertices and you can manipulate them to create the surface that you want. So there's no solid, it's all surfaces, but that's very useful when you're doing things that needs to look fluid, especially the body of a car, body of a plane, and things like that. Of course you can do a bit of that in solid modeling, and you can do a bit of solid modeling in the surface modeler, but that's not what they're meant to be for. A good example is Rhino, and you have videos, and it's very good to make fluid forms, as I said, cardboards, tools, organic tools like this. This is very, very useful, and I use Creo for many years, and it's very nice and very easy to use, very intuitive. All right, so that's basically the end of this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. Unless otherwise stated, the graphs are from Full Circle, and the review of the models are from this website. I'll put all this on the YouTube channel in the comments so you can have a look at that. Thank you very much, and I hope you've learned a few things from this presentation. Thank you.